Critical focus is achieved by careful use of the fine adjustment.
Hello and welcome back to another installment of my uncharitable readings of Doctor Who storylines. I love this show with all my heart, but I remain a hater first and foremost. No, I will never make a video about Kill the Moon. The only successful YouTube video I have ever made was one of this particular format, in which I argued that the 12th Doctor is very autistic and went over the positives and negatives about how this coding was handled. It pissed some people off, but the response was mostly very positive, probably because that was before I started showing my face in videos. Thank you very much to everyone who left nice comments and held civil discussions on that video, and to the people mad at me for saying 12 has autism, she's also a communist trans butch lesbian with a Tumblr account, so you can get mad at me for saying all that now too. One day I will get into videos about the classic eras, I promise, but I'm gonna be honest, Doctor Who hipsters scare me on a primal level, so I'm gonna stick with the normie seasons right now to play it safe. Specifically this time, I would like to talk about the 11th Doctor, or more specifically, his companion, and more specifically than that, the girl one, Clara Doesn't Count. You read the title, let's get on with it. This video is about why Amy Pond is gay. Yeah, okay, fine. That's a bit of an oversimplification, just promise you'll hear me out. Amelia, or Amy Pond, was the main supporting character and the 11th Doctor's resident damsel from 2010 to 2012 and appeared for 2.5 seasons. Much like previous and subsequent TARDIS companions, Amy Pond is chronically not like other girls and has a hard time fitting in with the monotonous convention of upper middle class nuclear living. She very explicitly serves the escapist slant of the show by being a free-spirited youth who dreams of bigger things than her mundane life, who is miraculously granted the ability to explore the universe and the wonders of space by our masculine hero. She's different. She's trapped by the expectations of her culture, but she's capable of so much more. The very first scene she appears in as a child pretty effectively illustrates this by showing her in her room at night praying to Santa.
Dear Santa, it's Easter now, so I hope I didn't wake you. But honest, it is an emergency.
I guess. It's subtle in a way that doesn't, like, shove down your throat that she's like cartoonishly quirky to the point of unbelievability, but it's an effective indicator to anyone paying attention that she has at least some difficulty navigating normal human behavior. Amy understands the individual concepts of praying and of Santa enough to interact with them to a degree, but she fundamentally lacks understanding of the separate purposes those two concepts serve to most people, and she probably doesn't realize that her way of engaging with them is wrong. She understands that Santa gives you things you want, and she's probably also seen people pray for what they want, so to her this course of action is entirely logical, if a little absurd to the audience. We also see her characterized as not, like, irrational necessarily. I mean, she certainly has a process of logic, it's just like a little misguided, but we learn that she is somewhat childish in how she views and interacts with the world, despite her attitude of nonchalance. We learn not only that she is a child who poorly replicates the behaviors she observes in others without fully understanding them, but also that when faced with an unknown threat, she is the kind of person who will seek out guidance from Santa instead of, like, the police. All of these little details, as well as her underwhelming response to the Doctor's appearance in her yard, were a great choice for how to establish her personality, and now we know that she's a logical thinker who doesn't often respond with the appropriate emotions when something she doesn't understand happens. In other words, she was written to be funny and cute and quirky and accidentally just reads as some form of autistic. In other words, she is the most Doctor Who companion of all time. Speaking as someone who typically finds child characters annoying and bland and unrealistic, I really love how Amy is written as a kid. As this opening scene progresses, we get to know her personality more intricately, and she remains very consistent and believable. She stays entirely calm and logical in the face of the unknown, which even the Doctor comments on as unusual.
Of course you're not. You're not scared of anything. Box falls out of the sky, man falls out of the box, man eats fish custard, and look at you.
And she asks the kind of questions a kid her age would. For example, asking the Doctor if his time machine is real and literally nothing else about the fact that he claims to have a time machine. Hilariously implying that she has already accepted that time machines do exist, she's just suspicious of the Doctor and his time machine. To be honest, I can't really blame her. If, like, a really wet Matt Smith crash landed in my backyard, I probably would be pretty hesitant to believe what he was saying, even if I believed in time travel. Ice pack time. I love Australian spring. Gotta put that on my lap. In this scene, we also see how the Doctor keeps up with Amy and engages with her incredibly easily, in a way that most adult people in her life probably struggle to, so the fact that she becomes attached to him so quickly makes a lot of sense to me, even if at first she seems entirely unbothered by his time machine shenanigans. He doesn't talk down to her, and he communicates on her level without being patronizing, which I think she clearly appreciates. I wonder if there's any specific group within society who can relate to growing up feeling alienated before meeting someone who introduces them to a way of life and existing that they finally feel at home in. Haha. Did I say that? Anyways, then we flash forward a decade or so, and the episode introduces us to Rory Williams, the beta cuck to the Doctor's Alpha Chad, whose entire character is basically just that he's the most normal, average guy on Earth. I love him, he is excellent. In the first few episodes, Rory is shown to be an incredibly one-note side character that Amy abandons without a second thought to run off with the Doctor. But as the season progresses, he becomes a much more well-rounded and developed character who we can sympathize with. And once he becomes like a semi-official member of the TARDIS crew, we watch him grow from a character whose anxious and insecure demeanor is often played for laughs into a cool guy, much more respected by the show. I love Rory's character development. I've always appreciated how he slowly gains confidence in a way that helps him grow out of his one-sided dick measuring contest with the Doctor. I also like how he's allowed to remain a total male wife who will die for his woman in a second, and that his character development isn't learning to stop being that, but instead learning to remain a total bottom while still respecting himself and standing up for himself when he needs to. Like, by the end of his time on the show, he still absolutely adores Amy and he makes it known, but he isn't insecure in their relationship or like afraid of her leaving him for someone better, and it's clearly shown to be much healthier for both of them. And yes, we could talk about how he's a self-insert for Moffat who clearly wants Amy to step on him, but I prefer to ignore that particular piece of influence. The whole premise of this video is predicated on complete willful ignorance to the intention of the writers anyway. Rory's cute, I don't care, I'm taking him away from you, Steven. Go stand in the corner. The dynamic that forms between Amy, Eleven, and Rory in season 5 is, on the surface, very reminiscent of a typical heterosexual love triangle. Amy, queen of horrible timing, leaves with the Doctor initially the night before her and Rory's wedding, which understandably upsets him and pretty quickly establishes his jealousy of the Doctor and anxiety that Amy will leave him for the magic and wonder of space travel and whatever mysterious settings a sonic screwdriver might have. Here is where I need to make it clear that no, the point of this video is not, the Doctor is technically genderqueer by human standards, so cause Amy likes them, maybe sort of that means she's gay. That would not be nearly pretentious enough. Also, it's very clear that Amy loves Rory, so even if true, it isn't that interesting to me. I'm not here to argue that Amy is a lesbian or trans or non-binary or anything specific. While I might draw comparisons to experiences that typically correspond with individual queer identities, it is not my goal to ascribe any of those identities definitively to Amy. Instead, I would much rather analyze the ways in which she is coded as queer, and to discuss queer coding when it exists in such an abstract, nebulous form as this, we must also discuss queer theory. In dumbass terms, queer theory is essentially the idea that we should strive to look at the world and society through an alternative lens. It's a way of thinking that tries to oppose and question traditional assumptions about literally all aspects of life, and contrary to popular belief, not just about gender and sexuality. It's a way of thinking that questions what we might see as default or standard in all areas, and provides avenues through which to approach millions of intersecting ideas with complexity and nuance. The academic act of queering is not always about imposing queerness that is like explicit gender or sexual variance on something, but instead about utilizing the language of queer experience to imagine new ideas and to approach concepts often taken for granted within a new frame of reference. Basically, queer theory is just the rejection of traditionalism for tradition's sake, and I bring this up to make it clear that when I say Amy Pond is queer, I mean the queer in queer theory, not the queer that the Q in LGBTQ stands for. That being said though, she is definitely both, and it's not like there's no relevant overlap. The episode Amy's Choice very obnoxiously presents us with a narrative centered around the show's attempt at this gay little love triangle. In typical Doctor Who fashion, it is not subtle at all. Basically, this freak appears on the TARDIS and presents our heroes with two states, one where the TARDIS is slowly drifting towards a cold star that will kill them all in in a short amount of time, and another where they're not on the TARDIS, but they're instead chilling in this small, cute, old-timey village with a bunch of elderly people, and Amy and Rory are married and expecting a baby. How nice, I think. Rory is a doctor, just like he's always dreamed, and Amy is a stay-at-home mother, also just like Rory has always dreamed. And the twist is that one of these states is a dream and the other is reality, and they need to figure out which is which so they can accurately gauge which one to kill themselves in. And there are a bunch of murderous, bloodthirsty senior citizens in the town, and the TARDIS is super dead and out of their control because the writers needed stakes, I guess. Obviously, it's quite clear to the audience which reality is the real reality, but the gang are dumb as fuck and have absolutely no idea. Rory keeps insisting that the town is real, while Amy and the Doctor aren't sure. Amy says they both feel real, and the Doctor just keeps repeating that they trust nothing. They fluctuate back and forth between both potential dream states as the threat within each one grows more imminent, and this guy whose identity we don't know yet, but who calls himself the Dream Lord, taunts them all by, like, targeting their insecurities with snide remarks. He talks about how Amy is, like, emotionally unfaithful.
I've seen your dreams. Some of them twice, Amy. Blimey, I'd blush if I had a blood supply.
While repeatedly reiterating how much of a beta cuck Rory is.
A bumbling country doctor who thinks the only thing he needs to be interesting is a ponytail.
He also emphasizes that she has to choose between the two boys romantically, again tying this choice to the two dreams. This show is not subtle.
Pick a world, and this nightmare will all be over. They'll listen to you. It's you they're waiting for. Amy's men. Amy's choice.
The Dream Lord's mockery seems very effective on Rory. He's a very insecure guy, so he's extra vulnerable to the Dream Lord's manipulation, which is why the fake dream is so explicitly catered to him. Amy and the Doctor both very much dislike it, but the Dream Lord knows that Rory will want to defend it as reality, even if he isn't actually sure, because he wants his insecurities to be disproven, which the Doctor calls him out on pretty definitively.
How interesting.
What is?
Well, your dream wife, your dream job, probably your dream baby. Maybe this is your dream.
It's Amy's dream too, isn't it, Amy?
Yes, of course it is.
Yeah.
The Dream Lord is well aware that Amy, on the other hand, isn't as easily manipulated as Rory. Instead of making her a personalized simulation of perfection, he repeats Rory's anxieties back at her, talking about her disloyalty and the final choice she must make, presenting Rory and the Doctor as two equal forces in her life that she must choose one of and lose the other. He and Rory are completely on the same page, and I'll talk about why I think this is absolutely awesome a bit later. Eventually, Rory ends up barricading himself and Amy inside a room clearly set up for their future child to inhabit. Symbolism, wow, and the Doctor gets in too through the window, but before they can really do anything, Rory gets got by one of the scary old people and totally fucking dies. Earlier, the Dream Lord said that if you die in the dream world, it's chill, but dying in the real one means you're obviously fucked. So Amy reasons that she might as well die because, in her words,
This is the dream. If we die here, we wake up, yeah?
Unless we just die.
Either way, this is my only chance of seeing him again. Because if this is real life, I don't want it. I don't want it.
It is so fucking sad. So Amy and the Doctor slam their cute little minivan into the house, which isn't the method I would have gone with personally, considering there's probably a very good chance of surviving a bit too long for comfort there. But hey, unsatisfying and inefficient as it is, I understand not wanting to advertise any too effective suicide methods in this family show. Anyway, it apparently worked, and the gang all wake up back on the TARDIS, which is alive again and flying away from the scary cold star. Phew, what a relief. Considering the obvious nature of which reality was the dream, the first time I watched this episode, I remember expecting the TARDIS to be the fake one, just because I thought it would be the easiest twist. Instead, the main conflict initially appears to conclude with the opposite, which I guess is a weird subversion in its own right. Sure, I guess. Not so fast, though, because our expectations are attacked again, and we get the actual twist, which is that both realities are fake.
I'm gonna blow up the TARDIS. He was offering us a choice between two dreams.
Wow, crazy. And then we get another twist where we find out that the Dream Lord is like the personification of the Doctor's evil subconscious or some shit.
A speck of psychic pollen from the candle meadows of Krast on Slava. Fell in the time rotor, heated up, and induced a dream state for all of us.
That was the Dream Lord, then? Those little specks?
No. Sorry, wasn't it obvious? The dream Lord was me. Psychic pollen, it's a mind parasite. It feeds on everything dark in you. Gives it a voice, turns it against you.
wow, he's just like the Joker. Anyway, Doctor characterization happens. I don't care. It's not interesting. It doesn't affect the plot. The episode ends with the Doctor being kind of emo and Amy and Rory being in love because it's all chill now. So, what does it all mean? Or, more specifically, what does this ugly transvestite think it means? First off, as I'm sure you've picked up on because you're so smart and sexy, the symbolic binarism in this episode is incredibly overt. The two dream states represent Rory and the Doctor's different roles in Amy's life, who in turn represent the inner conflict she's going through between the comforts of traditional subservience and the freedom of chaos. Rory's dream represents traditional values, the standard family unit and patriarchal domesticity, and how Amy feels uncomfortable in that kind of environment. And the Doctor's dream represents the thrill as well as the very real dangers that come with rejecting that life and pursuing alternative experiences. The episode makes a point by showing that while Amy is seemingly safer at first in cottagecore domestic bliss with her rat tail having male life, she is unhappy and unfulfilled.
I want the other life. You know, where we're happy and settled and about to have a baby.
Don't you wonder, if that life is real, then why would we give up all this?
This is a feeling that is relatable to many queer people. A lot of us will go through periods of trying to adhere to cis heteronormative expectations to stay comfortable. It is a lot harder to live a queer life than it is to live a straight life, but if your heart is queer, living a straight life against your will can feel like a death in itself, even if you are technically safer. I believe that the murderous elderly represent Amy's fear of this kind of spiritual queer death. Hear me out. They disrupt the peace of Rory's dream, but they are also a part of it, and they don't necessarily feel out of place. They kind of rudely confront Amy and Rory both with the pain that will inevitably come if Rory keeps trying to make Amy a person that she isn't and that she will never be. They intrude on Rory's peaceful dreamscape and end up tearing the two of them apart in the most final and devastating way possible, and this is what it takes for them to both realize that they value their love for each other over their superficial differences. Now, I'll say it, these two shitheads are immature as hell, both of them in different ways. I won't pretend to be an expert on relationships, as I am completely lacking in romantic attraction towards a single thing, except maybe the 12th Doctor. Actually, who am I kidding? That attraction is purely sexual. But even I can pretty confidently say that Amy treats Rory like shit. She clearly cares about him a lot, but in her head she is so confident that his anxieties are unfounded, she just kind of completely dismisses them.
You are always so insecure.
You ran off with another man?
Not in that way.
It was the night before our wedding.
We're in a time machine.
She loves him, and she knows that she loves him, but she doesn't love the exact kind of relationship he wants, and simply just doesn't bother to communicate that to him, obviously making him feel pretty confused and led on. She knows what she wants, but she's hesitant to make a definitive final call, probably because she just doesn't want to potentially hurt Rory, or just because it's hard for her to admit even to herself how she feels, even if it is objectively the kinder thing to do. As we see later on, Rory never gets his cottagecore bliss, but he's still happy to just be with Amy and support her through whoever she decides to be.
Anyway's good for me. I'm happy anyway. It's up to Amy this time. Amy's choice.
He's even shown to be happier and more confident once he's able to let go of the dream that she never shared with him. He's happier once he's able to stop obsessing over a fairy tale future that he knows probably isn't gonna happen with Amy. I don't think Amy's intentions were ever malicious, but she definitely wasn't a good partner, at least in earlier episodes. Sure, a lot of that is probably Moffat having a fetish for abusive women, but if I try to ignore that, Amy strikes me as the kind of person who is so confident about how she feels towards the people in her life that she just never bothers to give them any reassurance. Because she can see inside her own head, and she can see that she loves Rory and isn't gonna leave him. She scoffs at his anxiety to the contrary, neglecting to consider that he can't read her mind. She and the Doctor drag him around, make fun of him, emasculate him, put him in danger that he didn't consent to, dismiss and ignore his feelings, and treat him like a comic relief sidekick. And Rory's a young straight dude. Of course he's going to interpret this as romantic rivalry, even if Amy and the Doctor are having their weird queer platonic situationship moment that neither of them really believe necessarily excludes him. Rory sees the Doctor as a masculine rival or a threat that he must defeat in order to claim his prize of getting to choose who Amy gets to be. Unlike her, his view on relationships is immature in the sexist way.
Yours is bigger than mine.
We are so fucking lucky that he canonically died before Andrew Tate became popular. Regardless, they both have pretty believable flaws, just in different ways, and they learn to overcome these flaws together through mutual and external support. Hooray. Now, being in a cringe first relationship in your young adulthood isn't an exclusively queer experience. I get that. But the specific internal conflict Amy is going through, as well as the imagery of traditionalism turned horror being evoked, are telling, if probably accidentally, a very queer story. Even the conversations Amy and Rory have throughout the episode feel like classic queer tragedy. When Rory says,
"We have to grow up eventually,"
and Amy replies with,
Says who?
this is a quite powerful example of what I'm talking about, because, well, yes, Amy is still pretty blatantly disregarding Rory's feelings. The sentiment she's expressing is correct. Rory considers growing up, aka becoming part of an average family unit, to be inevitable, whereas Amy has realized through the Doctor that there are other ways of existing, and that there are other ways to find value and fulfillment in life that are probably more suited to her. Rory is still stuck in the ways of tradition, which is why he finds the Doctor and Amy's defiance of marriage so threatening. He's witnessing her queer journey through the lens of heteronormativity, and he's misinterpreting her behavior because he's still operating under the assumption that she abides by the same rules he does in terms of identity and relationships. This is very reminiscent of how many relationships devolve when one of the people involved comes out as queer. Not even necessarily romantic relationships, just like any kind of relationship that a baby queer might have with a cis straight person in their life. A lot of queer people experience that when they come out, their family and friends react with a sense of loss or grief, even while the queer person in question is absolutely sure that queer life is a positive thing for them. To our friends and family who might not have had the same experiences we do with queer people in queer spaces, they must observe our queerness in the only way they know how, through the lens of their own cis straight experience. And because we exist within a culture that treats cis straightness as the default, as inevitable, we are all to some degree conditioned to see queer identity as a loss. So many people are so unfamiliar with what it means to exist as a queer person that all they'll see is the things you miss out on by living queerly. This is why so many queer people are intimately familiar with phrases like, "I'll never have any grandchildren, you're destroying your body, you're throwing your life away, and it's just a phase, you'll grow out of it." Similarly, the only way Rory knows how to engage with Amy's relationship with the Doctor is through a projected image of straight romantic rivalry, and his insecurities kind of just reflect someone out of their depth culturally who's grappling with new and complex experiences. Amy loves the Doctor, but her love for him is very different to her love for Rory. She understands this to a degree, but she's still obviously affected by Rory's jealousy, and she does feel guilt about her love for the Doctor, and the Dream Lord preys on this. When Rory says we have to grow up eventually, there is a great irony present because he is the one who won't grow up. He clings to this frail idea of respectability that is falling apart before his eyes instead of, opening his mind to the new possibilities that life in the TARDIS presents. To him, the adventures they're on are just something he's humoring Amy in. Something he believes, or at least wants to believe, that she must eventually just grow out of and realize she does just want to get married and have a baby. He completely dismisses her, believing she's misguided or delusional, and he is standing firmly in reality. Reality being narrow human traditions in the face of literally all of time and space. Meanwhile, Amy is finally in an environment that truly suits her, and she's experiencing her life to the fullest for the first time. And yet, she definitely isn't the most mature, and she definitely could be showing a bit more compassion for Rory, but she blossoms while he wilts under the pressure of what he wants her to be, yet he still claims to be a realist who truly understands growth. Okay, but hold on, that's all well and good, but doesn't Amy choose Rory? If the Doctor represents queer life, and Rory represents straight life, doesn't Amy metaphorically, symbolically, allegorically decide she was straight after all by choosing Rory? The metaphorical, symbolical, allegorical, straight option? Okay, yes. Here's the dilemma I've been avoiding. We need to talk about it eventually. If we follow the metaphor through all the way to its conclusion, the message kinda seems like it's saying that Amy was actually straight the whole time. And I had this thought too the first time I watched the episode, but I've thought about it a bit more since then, and I think it's actually a bit more complex than that. Yes, Amy chooses Rory as her romantic partner, but one, they were literally engaged, so no shit, and two, it's not this decision that ultimately defeats the Dream Lord. We think it is for a moment, but the actual twist at the end is that neither reality was the true reality. Neither choice would define Amy's existence. And as I said earlier, Amy's life from this point on is very much more in line with what she actually wants. She literally travels with Rory and the Doctor until she fucking dies. She doesn't have to sacrifice either of them to be happy. The solution isn't choosing one of the Dream Lord's restrictive and ultra-specific options, both centered around Amy's relationship with particular men. It is rejecting the premise of his question altogether. The Dream Lord deliberately plays into the ways of thinking that make Rory and Amy's relationship so unhealthy in the first place in order to simply exploit their insecurities. He's a classic taunting villain. No shit his presentation of Amy's options are rigged against her.
Notice how helpful the Dream Lord was. Okay, there was misinformation, red herrings, malice, and I could have done without the limerick, but he was always very keen to make us choose between dream and reality.
The actual symbolic resolution of the episode is Rory and Amy both realizing that they can be who they both are and still be happy, and the only reason Amy would ever have to leave Rory for her queerness would be his unwillingness to accept it. Rory realizes it's not him Amy's unsatisfied with, but the values he's pushing on her, and Amy realizes that being honest with Rory doesn't necessarily mean losing him. Queer theming in media often does not align with specific and often quite new labels and identities, but what it does align with is a wider, more abstractly queer experience. Being a person who doesn't quite fit in with society, someone who doesn't feel entirely fulfilled by the things you're told you should be, finding liberation in people you identify with and pursuing a lifestyle that suits you, dealing with the consequences this has on your loved ones, and working to repair relationships with those whose expectations you failed to fulfill if you think it's worth it. And it's clear that Amy thinks Rory is worth it, which is why she doesn't just run off and leave him for the Doctor entirely, even if she's being arguably more cruel by failing to just fucking talk to him and tell him about how she feels. And he loves her enough to give up his expectations of what their relationship should look like and support her in the things she loves without fear. Hello friends. You might be wondering, why has this fascinating broadcast full of great points been interrupted? The reason is that the last several minutes of my recording faced some audio issues, and as you can tell by the zero audio issues in the rest of this video, I do not skimp on quality, so I will re-record my rant from that particular segment, as I'm sure it is very crucial to the state and future of the world. Please enjoy the rest of this video, which will be filmed slightly closer to my face and in the middle of the night. What I was trying to say before God tried to silence me is that I believe Rory's experience could be very relatable to someone who's ever watched their partner transition. It can be weird to get used to and to let go of the person who you thought your partner was, but it can be much, much more rewarding to, in the end, know that you're loving the person they really are and not who you wanted them to be to their detriment. When most people find out that someone they're very close with is different to what they assumed, it's always a shocking experience, and that can very much feel like the person you knew has been taken from you. In Rory's metaphorical case, you might have already had an inkling that your loved one would probably be happier living a queer life, so what do? You try your hardest to get them to change their mind, and when it inevitably doesn't work, you become devastated or even guilty for not being enough to satisfy them. This isn't actually how queer identity works, but this is how we're taught to think. Queerness is tragically and universally seen as a failure at straightness, a failure at the default. And just like Rory, when we feel responsible for someone we love, their failure feels like our failure. Rory blames his own inadequacy for Amy's queerness. He feels like he isn't man enough for her. That if he was only more masculine and more sexually compelling, she wouldn't feel the need for the Doctor, and more broadly, for a queer life. Amy going to such extreme levels at the end of the episode to show her love for him is what it takes for Rory to finally snap out of it and realize that the way Amy just fundamentally has nothing to do with him. He can't change her, and she doesn't want him to. She loves him, she just wants him to look past his insecurities and see her for who she is. And he does. It's not immediate, and it takes him time to adjust and to fully get over his anxiety around the Doctor, but he is able to relax a little and let himself breathe, which clearly makes Amy incredibly happy. She never wanted to leave him for the Doctor, yet his fears inadvertently made it feel necessary. The Dream Lord is the struggle of navigating queer identity under a social system that sees it as a failure. And Amy's choice itself is an illusion that must be broken down and overcome with love and self-truth. Binarism is unstable and impractical, but love always prevails. Then I guess they all form a polycule. I don't know, it's kind of unclear, but I'm happy for them. Anyway, it's exactly 12 o'clock here. You might be wondering, oh, why couldn't you just wait until tomorrow to film this? The reason is because I am returning home to visit my family upon the morrow, and I will not have any time to finish this video. And if I don't finish this video before I go on holiday, I will never finish this video. So I'm just staying up all night to get this shit done. Thank you for watching it, if you watched this far. I average like 200 views, I think, and I know a lot of people consider that small, but I'm not kidding when I say that every view makes me happy. If even one person finds meaning in the things I have to say, I consider that a success. I really like the conversations I got to have with people on my 12th Doctor videos, so if you have something to say, don't hesitate to leave a comment and I will probably reply to it. As with my last few videos, there are resources in the description to provide support for Palestine. As dystopian as it feels to make videos while the world is like this, the least I can do is provide a reminder that there are many people who desperately need our help right now, and I believe it's wrong to engage in lighthearted things like this without at least acknowledging them and doing what we can. Wherever you are in life and whatever you're going through, remember you're loved, and that is the end of my video. Goodbye.
Don't forget to click below to subscribe to the official Doctor Who YouTube channel.